Oh, there it is.
Oh, I'm eating.
If it's blue, it's on. If it's clear, it's off. You want it
Oh,
on.
yeah, social
And
net.
then hit the amplify my voice, which is directly above it. And
Yep,
that's
got
how
it.
you'll be heard. Okay. All right. So
right.
hello, everybody. Welcome. Hey, Daniel. We're just doing a sound check. I'm so glad everybody's here. Wonderful. So Charlie,
don't have no
let's see
rights
if you
here,
can be
Charlie.
heard.
Hey, man.
Yay,
Yeah.
you're on megaphone. We can hear you. Beautiful. And Daniel, you're all set? All right.
All set?
Rock and
Are we good to
roll.
go?
All right. Yep, and I'm controlling slides. So, yay.
Wonderful. Here we go. All right, guys, give me some love. How are you all doing? You all good? That's right. How's the conference going for you? Right. Give me some hearts if you know Charlie Fink, because I think a lot of people know who you are, Charlie.
That's great.
Your reputation precedes you, but I'm going to read out a little bit about the work you've done, and just for the
Thank you.
people who may not know you, here we go. So just bear with me. There we go. So Charlie Fink is a former Disney, AOL, and AG Interactive executive who writes a popular column about XR for Forbes. He's a consultant to some of the leading companies in this space. And as a 27-year-old junior executive at Disney, Fink famously came up with the idea for The Lion King, which is amazing. In the 90s, he was executive vice president and COO of VR pioneer Virtual World Entertainment. Variety calls him the XR explainer in chief. Now, if that isn't a title as cool as they come, I don't know what is. We are super excited to have Charlie Fink join us here. And I cannot wait to hear what he has to say about the next 5 years in XR. But just before we do that, a huge big shout out to all of the volunteers who've been making this happen and who've been figuring out slide glitches to deliver this conference that is coming along really nicely now. We're 24 hours in. I have to say for myself, I'm shattered, but I'm loving every minute of it. Thank you to all the supporters and our sponsors, all the platforms. It's a huge, big community that's coming together, and we could not be more honored to be a part of it. Having said that, Charlie, I'm going to hand over to you and take it away, please.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. I thought I turned that damn thing off. That's the real world intruding. And, my phone, and 3/4 of those calls are trying to sell me Viagra. So anyway, I wrote a book. It came out last March called Convergence. And we're going to talk a little bit this morning about what convergence really means and what technologies are converging in our XR corner of the world. A little bit about me. I'm going to go over this pretty quickly because I think most of you guys do know me, and I just got a fantastic introduction, and it's always better to have other people talk about you than talk about yourself. So let's just advance to the next slide. They have to help me with this because we don't have control from the stage because of the way the room is configured. So can we go to the, oh, there we go. So those are my two books. Next slide. Next slide, please. There should be an AR-enabled Charlie jumping up with the book. It's, yeah, there you go.
It takes a long time to load, sorry.
Okay, get this slide. So it's an AR-enabled book. So you read it with your smartphone in your hand and you hold it over certain markers and things like the cover, and you get additional media content, and a lot of it's super entertaining, and so it's a book plus. Next slide, please. And I think, by the way, all paper books will be like this. There's no reason to own a paper book, except it's a giant marker for AR. So let's just start at the beginning. What does convergence mean? Convergence means when each new platform of technology is introduced historically, what we see is not the technology, but we see what the technology enables. So if we talk about the Industrial Revolution, which was driven by the invention of the steam engine. Now, Fulton didn't think when he was creating the steam engine that he was creating a factory, right? That was the result of the convergence of his invention and other technologies, right? So we have the modern age, which followed, which was essentially driven by electricity, right? So when electricity was invented, they weren't inventing the telephone, they weren't inventing things like refrigerators. And then as we progress into the digital age and into the fourth wave, we can see that GPS in your phone wasn't supposed to be Uber. So these technologies enable entrepreneurs and other creative people to make new things that potentially change our lives. Next slide. So that's where we are right now, that moment. That is this moment right now. I like to say that we are in the XR world at the equivalent of 1993 for the internet. So this is a journey. It doesn't have a defined beginning. It doesn't have a defined end. That's the thing about an era, right? Because we're pulling back to the super big picture. So now let's lens in and talk about XR today. I think that 2019 was a watershed year for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it kind of set the table for the next 5 or 10 years, right? We know what's about to happen. Really, for the first time, I've been covering XR since 2016. And in 2016, I mean, we thought that gaming PCs were going to proliferate. There were going to be millions of people using gaming PCs to access the metaverse using the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive. And, that was, as we look back on it, kind of ridiculous. That was never going to happen. I was always pretty skeptical about it, but hopeful. But I didn't really have a good reason to be hopeful until the Oculus Quest came out. Now, the Quest, there are a lot of trade-offs. Obviously, the optics aren't great. There's, this is not a photoreal world. I mean, for VR to really take off and attract hundreds of millions of users, I don't know whether the cartoon world that we're inhabiting together is going to cut it. It works for us. We're happy with the trade-offs because we remember 2016. But a consumer walking around in the street, when you ask them about virtual worlds and virtual reality, they don't expect this. So, 2019, a lot of interesting things were revealed about Magic Leap, about Apple's coming AR, VR, HMD, and Magic Leap pivoting to enterprise, which they say is not a pivot because they were always doing enterprise. A little unfair because they were doing everything, including enterprise. So I applaud them for doing less, right? They should do less. They should do more with less. So, understanding where all the big companies are and what they're working on has obviously helped shape the conversation. And so what I'm going to do now is I want to talk a little bit about the topics that emerged in 2019 that I think we're going to keep talking about this year because they're so important. And then I'm going to give you a look at what I think are the formative categories that need to be tackled, that need to be converged with all this wonderful hardware that is suddenly available. So we have this topic of see-through versus pass-through, right? Pass-through is that the cameras on the front of your device are what you're seeing, right? And so you're sort of mixing reality and the digital world in real time by digitizing reality. The other method is see-through. That's what the HoloLens does and what Magic Leap does. See-through has a great place, particularly in enterprises where you need to see your hands and you need your peripheral vision so you don't get hit by a forklift or fall down a set of stairs. So safety for frontline workers is probably an industry's largest concern, along with the security of their internal systems so see-through versus pass-through. I think this is going to become kind of a non-issue because the device that we buy, the device that Apple is making, is an AR/VR headset. So it can do pass-through, but it can also do see-through. And I think that's, and if you look at Qualcomm's design for their X2 platform, the first one of which is coming out this summer from a new company called Lynx, you'll see that they optimized that platform for dual-use AR and VR in the same device. Enterprise XR is happening. I mean, it is starting to scale, and there will be tens of billions of dollars made in enterprise XR in 2020, and it will continue to scale to hundreds of billions of dollars. So if you are an enterprise in this room, I think you're in the right place at the right time. As I said, consumer is going to take much more time to develop. Hearables. We have Bose working on the Bose frames, which are glasses which have stereo audio and microphone, and it lets you do spatial sound. Sound may become what we all thought vision was going to be, right? Because sound can do a lot of the things. For example, you're walking down the street and you want to know whether your train's on time. Well, it can whisper that in your ear. It doesn't have to interrupt your field of view. So I think that hearables have a place. Did my slides just die? Or can we bring them back? I can't see them on either the back screen.
Technical difficulties. Just hold on a second.
Right.
Trying to get them
brief hold
going.
for technical difficulties.
Yay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Without
dear.
my slides, I won't remember what I was going to say.
There. Okay. All right. There they go. How's that?
Excellent. Thank you. And, in this X2 platform that I was talking about, the thing is packed with 7 outward-facing sensors. So sensors, and again, the sensors don't have to be worn on your head, right? I mean, that's the X2 design from Qualcomm, but you could imagine a hearable and a wearable sensor interfacing with your smartphone and doing XR in that way, right? Because it's just leveraging what you are already doing and what you already have. You don't have to buy a whole bunch of new devices and charge them and carry them around. The other thing that we're seeing is this idea of a world mesh, right? If AR is going to enable the real world to be searchable, then the real world needs to be machine readable and clickable. And the only way that's going to happen is if there is a world mesh. And we see the beginnings of it with Google's AR Maps. But there are other companies, great companies like 6D AI working on it. You can bet big companies like Apple are working on it as well, since they don't want to be using Google's world mesh. I think Facebook is also working on it. So one of the issues in AR is how are these different massive clouds going to speak to each other, or will they not speak to each other at all? That's going to affect all of us profoundly. And then again, I started this whole conversation talking about convergence, and convergence is a process, and it is accelerating in this corner of the XR world. And that's going to play out over the next 5 years. We're going to start to see what exactly is AR, right? The technology is invented enough, and what's missing are the use cases, which, is up to all of us to create. Next slide, please. So we talked about some of these events already. Interesting things are happening in XR. We're starting to see the proliferation of 5G. Hopefully devices will catch up with that. I will say it is not the 5G that we were promised. That's millimeter wave 5G, and there are problems with it. It likes big open spaces. It hates buildings, glass, windows, and steel, which makes it very problematic. You can use it for a stadium, for example, where there's unobstructed outdoor sight lines, but we couldn't use it in this room. In this room, we'll be using something called mid-band. So it's 2 or 3 times faster than LTE, but if you have a good connection, it'll still enable a lot of new things, but it's going to take longer in coming than its hype level right now. We saw some weeding out. There will be more weeding out as we go along. Because the real question is, so many of these companies are taking on, Facebook, Apple, and if they, they may have a lead on them, but these other companies have extraordinary resources. They can fail over and over again, which is a luxury startup don't have. Next slide, please. So there are a few wild cards in our talk thinking about XR in the next few years. And these are mainly, companies that we don't think of, with maybe the exception of Snapchat. But look, I mean, Sony has 5 times as many headsets out there as Oculus and HTC. Oculus and HTC put together have half as many headsets as PlayStation VR. So that's my main point, but we don't know what's going to happen with Facebook AR. We know a lot more about Apple AR at this point than we do about Facebook AR, and other companies are have not given up. But the real question is, who on this list, is really going to emerge to take on the industry leaders. Next slide, please. So one thing is clear, that XR and wearable computing, right? We are on a journey to get to ubiquitous, invisible wearable computing, right? That is the goal of XR. And along the way, we are going to find, like the internet and like mobile, that this is an extraordinary, historic wealth creation event. Next slide, please. So let's play a game called Charlie's Pretend Venture Fund. If I had $100 million to invest in XR over the next 5 years, where would I put it? Next slide. So, I'm still guided by essentially what I said in the introduction to my first book 2 years ago, which is that technology succeeds when it takes what we're already doing and makes it better. And the other thing is, these things take a lot longer than we want them to. I was talking about 2016, but there are probably people in this room who have been working on XR since the 2000s. So, these things take longer than we want them to, and usually they take a form that is completely surprising to us. Why is that? Because we only see the future through the prism of today. So that in 2001, the acclaimed Stanley Kubrick movie, that I'm sure you all have seen because this is a room full of nerds. It's a fantastic movie, but they're on the space station and a guy wants to call home. So he goes to use a video phone. What is a video phone in 2001? It's a phone booth with a television in it, right? Because they couldn't visualize mobile phones. They had to see the future through the prism of 1971. Next slide, please. I love that when people like what I say, I get to see emojis. I wish I had that at other conferences. So the areas that I would focus on just broadly, volumetric and are going to become more and more important in mainstream medium, but also on our devices. Your smartphone in 5 years will have a 3D screen and will appear to you as 3D, even without you wearing glasses. So that display technology, volumetric 3D technology, is really going to take the devices and the XR we're doing today and make it much better, and make it much clearer to people why they would want it. In enterprise, we talked about, the amazing growth and the opportunity for XR, both AR and VR, to be hugely impactful. Training and stimulation are the killer app for enterprise. And that is going to be a huge business. I mean, if I were going to start a business from scratch today, I seriously would build an enterprise app store that, people could go into, on their device and buy the most commonly used use cases, right? No consultant needed. We talked about mirror worlds and this notion of an AR cloud that Ori Inbar popularized. I mean, right now there are hundreds of thousands of clouds. I mean, eventually there'll just be a few big clouds, but how are they going to talk to each other? That whole idea of a universal visual browser is super important. We talked a little bit about sensors. We didn't talk much about IoT, but everything with a chip in it is going to talk to everything else with a chip in it. So again, we're not thinking about how that creates Uber, but I think the opportunity is there to better connect us to the world and probably to each other, since all the apps we care about, every time we use our mobile phone, it's social, where we want to connect to other people. Again, I talked about hearables. The more I think about this, the more I think that it's a dark horse that nobody is thinking about that much because we're so obsessed with head-mounted displays. But people are already walking around wearing earbuds. And of course, as we talk about this 3D world, creators need tools, whether they're creating an enterprise application or whether it's world building in VR. You're going to need tools. So how am I doing on time? How much time do I have left? Or am I done? Was this 20 minutes or 30 minutes?
Just keep rocking. Keep going.
I can keep rocking. Okay.
Fabulous.
This presentation's got about 10 more minutes, so I won't hold you up for that long, much longer. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I'm just, drilling down a little bit on all these categories writ large. As we get these 3D displays, there's a huge opportunity to make 3D content. And again, I talked about the tools for making 3D content have to get democratized. And in fact, there's a company working on that right now called display.land. And if you haven't downloaded the display.land app, you are missing out on tremendous fun, because it's a photogrammetry app that works for your smartphone, so that for the first time, you don't have to take a picture of something, you can capture its volume. And the effect of that is extraordinary. And they have AI built into it, and they're evolving into something they're calling display.studio, which is going to let you take those volumetric captures you make and edit them. And you can place into these scenes, the volumes that you've captured, you can place virtual objects. And then in the real world location where that volume was captured, if you have the Displayland app, you can find that there then. So I can take the capture I did of the front courtyard of my house, I can put virtual butterflies in it, and when I go outside my house and hold up my device, the butterflies will be there. So, I mean, that is crazy. Next slide, please. So there's huge opportunities there. And I mean, that's an industry in itself. Training and simulation, killer app for enterprise. XR, AR, and VR is so good for this. And companies, and it's easy to use. It's here today. Next slide, please. I mean, medicine, there are all sorts of medicine and VR and AR conferences because, doctors are nerds and they're early adopters of technology. Ironically, and so are educators, by the way. And ironically, those are two industries most resistant to technological driven change. And often in medicine, the technology makes things worse for doctors instead of better. You always hear them talking about screen pollution. Yet today, a surgeon still has to have the anesthesiologist read out the vital signs and tell him what's going on with the patient. Otherwise, they have to look away from the patient themselves, which would be crazy. So that's an example. So I hope they are able to implement it quickly. But, in medicine and frankly, education, the question is always who's going to pay, right? Next slide. Oh, this is the slide. Yeah, I mean, AR cloud and mirror worlds. One thing we need is a universal visual browser so that when I go outside to the courtyard of my house to find the virtual butterflies, I don't need anybody's damn app, right? I should just hold up my phone and see it. Similarly, my device should tell me when there is AR content present and allow me to choose whether or not to do it. Right? Head-mounted displays aren't coming anytime soon for consumers. We have smartphones. So this is a way that XR can make our smartphones better and make AR more accessible, right? So your phone gives you a vibrate if you're in a place where somebody in your social group has left AR content, right? Because that's going to be a big thing that AR enables, is all this social content that whizzes by in your news feed can now be located in a place where it can be discovered. So the end of the news feed, in my opinion, is good news, because the social networks are so big and you have so many connections. The content goes by so fast that you miss what's important to you. So spatializing that, could be a solution to that problem. And also, by the way, pictures of food, those of you who are food photographers, those pictures belong where they were taken. They don't belong in the newsfeed. So we talked about sensors a little bit we've been talking about sensors through this entire talk because that's one of the technologies that is converging. Next slide, please. I just think that I would love to see more progress made with hearables. It sounds like Amazon may be making that happen. Next slide. Good area for investment and development. I think we'll see in the next 5 years some interesting applications that may make us think twice about our direction. Next slide. Codeless programming is a huge thing that everybody is trying to build, the codeless programming platform, the Wix, if you will, of XR and AR. Next slide, please. So, I like to say, because I ran virtual world in the 90s, that was the beginning, but it's still the beginning. All the devices that we have, the wonderful Oculus Quest, these are interim devices. I mean, in 3 years, this is going to be in a drawer with your Gear VR. That's another reason it's good that it's cheap because, Nreal, $500. I mean, in 2 years, if I have to put a $500 device in a drawer, I'm not gonna change my life. Enterprise is just booming. We're in a smartphone world. I don't see that changing in the next 5 years. The consumer side is going to continue to be dominated by games. By the way, I mean, mobile games, a $50 billion industry. That's just crazy. That's bigger than movies and music combined. That is crazy. Combined with PC and console, the games business is $140 billion. That's more than TV, music, and movies combined by like $70 billion. So, I mean, smartphones are the platform, games are the vehicle for making money, and then all these services like Uber and Seamless that all leverage the GPS. So, expect there to start being headsets, but even the Apple headset has got to iterate itself into something truly mobile and useful in the same way that the iPod became the iPhone, and you went from the first iPhone in 2007 to the iPhone 10 that we have today, soon to be announced iPhone 11. And I will tell you, it's 1993 in the internet, and those of you who were there know that a lot of people got rich. And a lot of people got rich off of mobile, and this is no different. I mean, we are all here at the beginning, as I said, of the largest wealth creation opportunity in 20 years. And this path to wearable and visible computing will happen in the lifetime of most of the people in this room. As for me, this avatar is deceiving. I am planting trees under whose shade I shall never sit, but my kids will, and you will. So next slide, please. So anyway, parting gifts always welcome, right? So you can get a free ebook if you want, or the 50% off the paper book and read it with your smartphone in your hand. The books are highly browsable and highly entertaining and feature contributions from leading voices in our industry. I think this is the final slide. Let's see. I haven't done this presentation in a couple months. So thank you for the opportunity.
I want to have an opportunity for people to take a quick selfie of it.
You mean of this slide?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll put it out also on our Discord and our Facebook for everybody. Because
Okay.
taking notes here in VR is still something, Charlie, we have not overcome, and I didn't see that in there. Our ability to write in VR still is lacking.
Oh, I also missed my mobile phone. Where is my interface over here that tells me what time it is and what the weather is and all those things in VR that we don't know?
Yes, exactly. All right. Hopefully everybody's got selfies. They're turning their back on you.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, Charlie, could you move over just a little bit to one side? You're right where the use code is. It's like, use code, Charlie's avatar.
There you go.
Thank you for pointing that out.
All right. Everybody's turned their backs. They're getting their selfies.
Lovely.
Besides, it's a wait. Come on, Charlie, pose. They're taking a picture of you too. So, yeah, there you go. Yay. Oh, photobombing. Don't cover up that code. All right.
Charlie, I just wanted to say, you were saying you missed your interface in here. I saw on Twitter, I think in the summer, a very enterprising young coder or something had managed on, I think it was high fidelity. He'd managed to bring Google Lens into high fidelity, and he was in a Japanese themed room, and he was holding his interface up to the Japanese themed room, and that interface was translating Japanese into English live. So it was AR inside VR.
That
was
awesome.
pretty cool.
And I think we need that.
Yeah.
I really do. I miss my apps. I'm looking at the alt space window, but I wish that little window, also showed me my smartphone. Do I have messages and so forth, and time. I mean, the actual, this menu gives you time, the alt space menu, which is really, I have a hard time telling time in VR.
Yeah, lovely. All right, well, come with me to the center here. No, Charlie, stay, come front. So before we take some questions, if that's all right, are you okay with that, Charlie?
Yeah, sure.
Right, just before we take some questions, everybody give it up for the one and only Charlie Fink. And was that not jam-packed full of insights and exciting stuff? I think we're all a lot more informed about where we're at, realistically, despite what we might all want. We all want it now immediately. We want AR or, mixed reality glasses instantly. But thank you for clarifying.
No one should doubt that it's happening. The question is its form and its timing. But I think we are, in the next 5 years, going to start seeing convergence, examples of convergence, and the acceleration of convergence. So it's fantastic. Just not
Thank
the
you
way
so
we
much.
thought.
Wonderful. So let's hear. I mean, I'm sure there's some people in here who have some questions for you, Charlie. And I'm going to ask people who have a question, please add your name to the panel or to the list by using the raise hand function. You should have the function to raise hand. And if you have a question, use that function now. That will populate on my list, and then I can bring up. We don't have that function in here, Laurel? People are saying there's no function? How's that? Yes, now we do. You should see that function now, please. Okay, so anybody questions? We've got one question. First come, first serve. Bob, I'm going to switch your microphone on. You should have, Bob. Okay, you should have, Bob, microphone. Make sure your megaphone is on. Yes, I think so.
Perfect.
Up here. What's your question, please?
Thanks for the talk. So obviously this technology has the potential to be very powerful in both positive and negative ways. I happen to work for a government agency. How do you see that governments need to potentially regulate certain areas, where are the areas that government should focus to make sure that this technology is deployed in a sensible, safe, and not harmful manner?
You know, that's a really good question because we are still grappling with that today, with the social-driven platforms, you know, and the problems we're having. You know, we thought when the internet was developed, this was the end of gatekeepers, and you know, the truth could never be suppressed. And in fact, with things like Black Lives Matter, it can't be. But just as truth cannot be suppressed, neither can lies. And I think that's, you know, the other thing is, I'm not sure anonymity has been a good thing for us as people. I think it takes away personal responsibility. Honestly, I think if the government did one thing, which was get rid of anonymity on most platforms, you would see very different behavior. You'd see a lot less trolling. You would see a lot fewer incitements. You know, I think we've got to solve the problems of today in order to anticipate what we need to do tomorrow, because I suspect that VR, once it's at scale, will take those problems that exist today and bring it right into VR with us. So I am concerned, but I'm more concerned about today and the difference between truths and lies and the lack of personal responsibility. Personal responsibility and social relationships is what makes the real world work. So why don't we make the virtual world work that way too? Because we don't walk around saying what we say online to people that we're looking at or standing next to.
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes us decent. And you take that away and people's worst selves come out.
That's very interesting. And it's interesting you say that now as well, and this question, because we are expecting any month now the launch of Oculus Horizons, a social platform, and nobody needs to mention the fact or the history of Facebook and privacy and data and so on. I mean, we have them to thank for the rise of Oculus as we see it today, so I'm not bashing them, but it's an issue, right? It needs solving, it needs addressing.
I think Twitter is doing better at it than Facebook, but I think both platforms have a lot of work to do. And Facebook especially is going to be a long time before they regain people's trust.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that question, Bob. We're going to take the next question here. The next question is from Caitlin Krause, switching your megaphone free. Caitlin, you should. Where are you? Give us some emojis. Where are you? There you are, waving your hands. Okay, love. All right, what's your question, Caitlin? Microphone, not sure. I did switch it free. Let me double check. Yeah, the microphone's, oh no, I switched.
Right.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please.
Good?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Sorry about that.
Hi, Charlie. We were together for AR in Action way back when. So the first release
They just
book,
had their third conference.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I just love what John Warner's doing, and you coming. It's just been years of seeing this grow. While I was watching your presentation, it just occurred to me, like live time, to ask you what you thought. Why couldn't education be approached as an enterprise? Like, why isn't learning the enterprise of learning? If trainings exist in the enterprise field, could we ever see, in your mind, almost like a lateral shift where education starts to be less siloed and more inclusive in that enterprise offering?
Well, I think that we're already seeing a lot of education go online, and certainly the proliferation, VR will be part of that. So online education is happening. I don't know how easily it can get pushed down into middle school and elementary school. I mean, there's no question those kids will be in the virtual world. Everyone will be. But whether they will go to school or have learning programs, I mean, it's going to be a lot like the real world today, I think. But, the YouTube and the internet in general have revolutionized and democratized education. The thing that I think about with regard to education is that there are kids in countries like China and South America and Africa, which is going to be the most populous continent in the world in about 15 years.
Yeah.
There are people who live, and I saw this when I was in Guatemala. People live in cinder block houses with dirt floors, and they have smartphones. So all of a sudden, that kid in that one-room cinder block house in Guatemala has access to all the world's knowledge, just like you do. So they also have access to online education. So I think the possibility to help people through education raise themselves out of poverty is very exciting. But the
That's
one thing
interesting.
that people in those huts don't have a lot of is time. And generally they do very physical labor, even young kids. So that also, just like in the real world, impacts their ability to be educated.
So it's an infrastructure kind of issue where maybe it takes a little bit of funding source, but also the structure of how we might reshape expectations is what I'm hearing for how.
I mean, I just think in general, like, the cell phone carriers like Movistar in South America and even Verizon in the US. I mean, one thing that they do well in China is promoting online stuff through, state vehicles in the news. They're always talking about it. They are the ones who are running around saying, hey, rural people, use your smartphone, join the future. I'd love to see that in places like South America and Africa, because this is a platform for education. But people have to know about it, and it has to be easy for them, and it has to be clearly structured. So, but again, education is going to converge with this technology as it has converged with technologies in the past.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you very much for that. That's super interesting. I wanted to just add a couple.
Yeah, that's a whole conference right there.
It is, yeah. But you were saying about the online education coming to VR, and in a sense, that's kind of what we're working on right here. But specifically, educators in VR, Laurel and I, were working on a project called the Borderless Classroom Network, which was inspired by our dear friend Chris Long, who passed away. And the idea there is a lot of our members are educators. They're connected with schools, and they have some kind of pupils, learners attached to them. So these schools are popping up around the world, and they're joining our membership. And we have a project to build a network of these schools, like a database where you can join the membership and then find other schools you want to collaborate with and maybe have shared classes with them via VR. And with regards to poverty, we are also developing scholarships and a fund to try and reach out to communities that are struggling, either with sponsorship or scholarships, funding, profits we're making. Also, the idea of recycling old headsets. You were saying you wouldn't have a problem putting a device in a shelf that was $500, or donate it to Guatemala, donate it to Zaire, donate it
to do that.
Somewhere there.
Yeah.
And then the final missing link, we're actually in talks, in very, very initial talks with some satellite data providers who might be able to help us, point data at individual communities, because they have a global reach, and then you don't need the same infrastructure. So please keep a lookout for that. Anybody interested, by the way, in the Borderless Classroom Network, look out for news in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be putting out an expression of interest in this project just to try and gauge how many people might be interested in this, because that's something we definitely want to work on. Okay, we got a couple of questions still coming here. We've got Carlos Austin. Your mic should be free, Carlos. Do you want to ask your question? Show us where you are.
Yes, I'm up here. Hello, Charlie. We met in South by Southwest last year, briefly up in Capital Factory. Good to see you again.
Yes, hi.
Greetings to all of you guys that are here. I'm glad you're here too. Charlie, my question is the privacy and the data that is being generated by all our avatars in the virtual space and how it be used, the legislation behind that. What thoughts do you have about because I think legislation is way behind because this is moving so fast.
Well, ideally, right, people would, this is the first thing I said to my students this semester is have you Googled the professor? And no one had, which is shocking to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you go to a business meeting where you didn't know who the other participants are? And then I said to them, I Googled you. So I know all about you guys. Now, I also told them I didn't Google all of them, so they don't know which ones were Googled and which ones were not. But the truth is, no one has protected their privacy. Now, I don't protect my privacy because my business is to be unprivate. But for most people, they are not aware of how they're giving away their data. And it's one of those things that you're not aware of it until you're sorry you did.
Right.
So I think that this is a problem in the real world. And again, we're going to bring that problem with us into the virtual world where it will be as hard to solve as it is in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Carlos. One more question.
Do you know people that are actually working on this to try to understand the ins and outs and working with Washington, D.C. and all that kind of stuff?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great day.
I mean, there are companies like Facebook and Apple, I mean, have huge, lobbying apparatus and consultants in DC. So they certainly are aware of their sole vulnerability at this point, which would be regulation, which, as I said, I think Facebook needs to be regulated.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's give some hearts and love to Charlie for that.
Yeah, let me say one last thing to you guys. I am the most findable person in the world. So if you have questions that didn't get answered, just DM me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. I'm Charlie Fink on LinkedIn. I'm Charlie Fink on Twitter. So I'm super easy to find. I love talking and hearing from people. I try to answer everybody in a relatively timely way. So I hope to hear from you, and I look forward to meeting you all in real life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Give it up for
Thank you,
Charlie Fink. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. All right. I'm out. Bye.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. Excellent, guys. Wasn't that amazing? The speakers we have coming here, this is sign of the times, man. This is he's talking about convergence. The fact we're doing this here is a result of and a sign of the convergence he's talking about. So before you all dissipate and wander off, I've just been notified by Laurel that behind the stage, Laurel, is it? I think behind the stage, there is it a portal you can join and go to the social space, hang out there, chill for a bit before the next event. Please make your way to behind the stage, jump in the social space and continue the conversation. Thank you all. It's amazing. Laurel, thank you. Volunteers, mods, thank you. Camera bots, thank you. And all right, back after a short break.
Okay, I have to head into the social space really quick, and I will be. Are you set up for Joe Millward to jump to that and get that set up, Daniel?
Is it a different event space?
Yes, and it is.
I can jump in.
Okay, because you're on. Oops, hang on a bit. You are on to host that one. Is that
okay? In theory, yes, but right after that, I'm supposed to be in Roomy, which I'm going to need to kind of leave early for to make sure I'm in. But the slides for Joe, is that something somebody can do?
To control the slides? I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I will check on it.
All right, thank you.
He's waiting for me to fix something in the room.
Right. I can start Joe Millward off if somebody can maybe do the far end of it. Or
all right.
Okay.
All right.
Lovely.
Okay,
all right. Thank you.
Daniel,
okay.
Hi, Lana.
Are you going into your next spot now, or?
Why do you ask?
Well, I'm going to be modding with you again in the next.
Lovely.
segment.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and get myself set up there with the camera as well to live stream it. Let me actually just end the stream here for a second.
Okay.